All right, 1 Peter 3, verse 20. 1 Peter 3, verse 20. Back up to verse 18 just so we get the context. He says, 1 Peter 3, verse 18. We covered this last week, but now you'll see how it flows. For Christ also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit, by the which also he went and preached unto the spirits in prison, which sometimes were disobedient, when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was preparing, wherein few, that is, 8 souls, were saved by water. You notice 2 things right off the bat: a timestamp, Noah, and then you notice 2 things that are set up: a spirit and a soul. Those are not the same, the spirit and the soul. The standard interpretation of this is this: the Spirit of Christ was in Noah while he was preaching to the disobedient of his day. So that's the Spirit of Christ that was preaching through Noah. But that's wrong. That's how you spiritualize something to death and lose the meaning. Noah didn't preach to spirits, he preached to men. Men are not spirits, men are souls. He talks about if a soul touch this or a soul do that. So you have a soul, and that's how you're known. The soul is the psyche. It's everything that makes up your personality. It's how we identify you different from another human. Noah didn't preach to anyone in prison. They didn't have any prisons back then. He didn't preach to anyone in the prison house of sin. That's what they'll try to say, the prison house of sin. that's wordiness. That's what they're trying to do, is give you fair speeches and convincing sounding words in order to sidetrack you from plain, simple English. Now, I know it wasn't originally English, but it is for us. The prison in our passage here is a literal prison with bars and gates, chain, and a key. When it says something, that's what it means. Very rarely does the Bible have a spiritualized meaning. I mean, you can take a spiritual application from something, but it has a literal meaning as well. Look at 1 Peter 4, verse 6, and notice something that's similar. 1 Peter 4, verse 6. For this cause was the gospel preached also to them that are dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit. Sounds similar, but it's not. In our passage in 1 Peter 3, he's not preaching the gospel. There's no gospel mentioned. He's preaching to people who are not people, spirits that are disobedient. And there's no indication in chapter 3 that they're going to live according to God after a judgment. So there's something different. In 1 Peter 4, 6, Christ preaches to them that are dead. Okay, the dead there, look at it in 4, 6, he said, the gospel is preached unto them that are dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh. So, when you're judged, when you die, you go before a judgment. And how are you judged? You're judged based on the things you did in the flesh, judged according to men in the flesh. That's not the same as the Spirit being preached to when he's talking in chapter 3. Chapter 4, 6, he says, the spirits in prison, which sometime were disobedient. Not chapter 4, that's in chapter 3. The spirits that were in prison were disobedient. Okay, who was disobedient in Noah's day? Well, it's a spirit. Look at it in Hebrews 1. And I'm getting my notes out of order because I just feel like it's a better order. Hebrews 1, verse 13. But to which of the angels said he at any time, sit on my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool? Of course, that was said to Jesus. Are they, the other hosts of heaven, angels, are they not all ministering spirits sent forth to minister for them who shall be heirs of salvation? That is, those angelic beings are classified as spirits, not humans, and not dead bodies. Um, they can take a body, but that's not really who they are. It's something they've clothed themselves with. All of this is information that is deep information. The Bible does this. It makes you go through a whole lot of Bible before you get details about things that happened way back. Here he's telling us about events that happened after Jesus Christ was crucified and in the grave. Here's what happened. He went down and he preached to spirits in prison that were disobedient. These spirits were the same spirits that were disobedient in Noah's day. There's something else that happens. He also goes somewhere in the heart of the earth while he's there, and he preaches the gospel to souls, not spirits, that are going to live according to God in the spirit afterward. Two different classifications. One are the damned souls from Genesis chapter 6, and one are the Old Testament saints. One need the gospel. The good news is this: I've come and I've finished all that's required. You can be freed, and there is no yearly sacrifice. Everything is finished. The complete atonement has been made. And then he leads them out. Those are the souls. The spirits are something else. They were disobedient, and those are going to be judged for an eternal judgment. Look at it in Jude 6. Jude 6, verse 1, or Jude 1, verse 6. Yeah, go to chapter 6. Tell me what that says. And the angels, now we saw in Hebrews, angels are spirits. And the angels, which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. They're reserved for judgment, not for reward, judgment for condemnation. Look at it in 2 Peter 2. 2 Peter 2, verse 4. 2 Peter 2, 4. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved unto judgment. This judgment is a condemnation. It's a final adjudication. There's some angels that sinned, obviously, back there when they did not keep their first estate. And we read about them in Genesis chapter 6. The sons of God is what they're called. And those who sinned, he cast down, and according to our passage, and put them in a chain in hell. Now, not all are chained, just the ones who sinned in Genesis 6. There's plenty that did it after. But we don't get any information about them being reserved in chains. That was a special heinous crime that God has, he's the judge of all the earth. He can pick his own judgments. We have nothing to say about it.
Could it be that those first angels were the ones that came down to the daughters of men?
Yes.
That's what it is.
Yep. 1 Peter 3:20, the angels or the spirits were disobedient in the days of Noah. So they rebelled against God and against heaven. We think of the angelic beings, and being in heaven means that everything is great and grand, but no, they have a free will too. There's a standard line that's been given. God created man because he wanted someone to love him because they chose to out of free will. Baloney. The angels are in the same position. Otherwise, none of them would have fallen. They have a free will as well. Look at it in Genesis 6, verse 2. Genesis 6, verse 2. Notice the free will show up. That the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. That's a choice. That means will. You have a free will to do that. That's an angelic being. That's a host of heaven rebelling against God and choosing their own what they want. That sounds like what humans do. In the Old Testament, especially in the book of Genesis, the sons of God are referred to a race of superhuman, supernatural beings that are created before earth. Job 38, verse 4. Job 38, 4. It says, Where wast thou when I laid the foundation of the earth? I was nowhere. Declare if thou hast understanding. Well, I'm dumb. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched a line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. These sons of God were present when God created the earth, so they predate the earth. And these are these spirits that he's gone to preach to about judgment. A group of those angels fall. Isaiah 14. Isaiah 14, verse 12. Now we know Lucifer does, but obviously there's more that come with him than just the one. We've seen that it happened a second time in Genesis 6. That was after this event here. Isaiah 14:12. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? Now, if you want something fun to research that. The nations. There was nations before there was Adam. He's speaking of Lucifer here. Lucifer before creating Genesis 1, 2 through the rest of the chapter. Verse 13, For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. So Lucifer had a throne. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Now, he's a lot smarter than man is. He didn't say, I'll be greater than God. That's something stupid that a man would say. He says, I'll be like. He still has a little more reverence than people in our day and age. He says, I'll be similar too. I'll be like the Most High. Verse 15, Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. Sounds like what we read in Jude, verse 6, not chapter 6, verse 6. Sounds like the same thing. He reserved them in chains under darkness in hell. Yeah, same thing. That's what happened to Lucifer and anybody who follows his lead. A group of those angels that fall with Satan are reserved in hell. Look at Matthew 25. Matthew 25, verse 41. Matthew 25, 41. I think when Lucifer fell, it was a literal world war. But more than a world war, it was a galaxy war. This is what the world has come up with that has blown people's mind, and they think that they just love this show, Star Wars. This is the original Star Wars. Genesis 25, 41. Then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. So he took some of those angels with him when he came down, and we've read about it. Okay, you find also in Genesis 6, another phrase that's used is children of the Most High. They'll die like men. That we've read that phrase, die like a man. Well, if you're dying like a man, you ain't a man. You're dying in similar fashion too, but you were really something else. So that's that spirit. That's those things that he preached to. Look at it in Psalm 82. Psalm 82, verse 6. Psalm 82, 6. This verse is repeated in the New Testament. Jesus uses it. It says, I've said ye are gods, lowercase, and all of you the children of the Most High, but ye shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. So that's those beings out there. We're not given a whole lot of information on the demonic side of the supernatural, and it's a good thing. We're given more information than we can handle. However, we're supposed to take note of everything God's told us. So he gives you the information for you to use and to know. Don't become occupied with it, because that'll, that the devil can use that too. Um, People will do that. You advertise, churches will advertise they're going to do a special, a series on demonic things, and the church will fill up. And look out for those that come in, that flock in. Something weird about them.
Talking about spirits last week. These are spirits. Is he going to take those back too?
No, they're reserved in chains of darkness forever. They don't come back. Mm-mm, mm-mm, mm-mm. Job 41, Job 4, verse 18. Job 4, verse 18. Says, behold, he put no trust in his servants, and his angels he charged with folly. That is, they've got they've been arrested. They've got a charge against them. The charge was folly. And he also called them servants. That's what we saw in Hebrews 1. They're all ministering spirits sent forth to minister to them that shall be inherit, that shall inherit eternal life, or something like that. So those are servants. That's what the whole angelic beings are there for. God created the angels to do his bidding, to do what he says. Kind of like what we are now. You as a Christian are a son of God, and your job is to minister for him, do whatever his bidding is. Same thing he created those for. He lost a whole bunch of them in Genesis chapter 6. And guess what? He's replaced them now. That's you and I. We're going to replace the ones who were locked in chains of darkness. Let's see, Revelation 20. Hell's obviously a prison. It's much more than a prison, but this is God's idea of prison. Remember that God is the one responsible for making hell. He made that for the devil and his angels. Wasn't prepared for a man. A man has no business in hell. He's not made to withstand it. He says in Revelation 20, verse 7, and when the 1,000 years are expired, that's the millennium, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. So hell's a prison. It's got other things about it too. To get Jude 6, we already read it. Jude 6, the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habit, he is reserved in everlasting chains under darkness, under the judgment of the great day. So there's actual chains down there. Every horror movie, they got the clinking of the chains in the dark. They get it from somewhere. It's the real deal down there. Revelation 20, verse 1. Revelation 20, verse 1. If you got a chain doesn't do you any good unless you can lock it up. We've got chains on our fences here to keep the hoods in the hood. Uh, but I lock them, but not always. Sometimes I just make it look like I locked it. I just drape it over and put the lock out as though it's prominent, so people think it's locked. It's not really. Now, God doesn't do that. When He locks a chain, you ain't busting out of it unless you got the key. The key makes all the difference. Revelation 20, verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. Hmm. The Bible is very literal, and there's a lot more just plain, simple explanation for these things than people try to overcomplicate it with. There's other descriptions of it. Jonah 2, verse 2. Jonah 2, 2. I cried by reason of mine affliction unto the Lord, and he heard me. Out of the belly of hell cried I, and thou heardest my voice. Drop down to verse 6. I went down to the bottoms of the mountains. The earth with her bars was about me forever. Yet thou hast brought up my life from corruption, O Lord my God. So there's bars down there too. Um, and that's not talking about Pensacola. We got a lot of bars here too. I heard a thing. Used to, in the Wild West days, they didn't have bars. They had saloons. But a saloon had a bad reputation. That's where you went in and you had your gunfight. You know, you played the card game and somebody's always cheating and starting a fight. The bar had a bad reputation. That's where the barmaids were. And all kind of wickedness went on in a saloon. After Prohibition, they opened up saloons again, but they wanted to change it so it looked refined. So they called it bar as a derivative of the word to bar someone, meaning there is a counter that the bartender stands behind. But I say there's more than that going on. We found somebody with a name Bar Jesus. That is to block, to impede the way. And that's what the bartender is for. He's serving something called spirits that impede your way. I don't know why I got off on all that. Okay, where were we? um, look at it in Matthew 16. Matthew 16, verse 18. Matthew 16, 18, a famous verse the Catholics all know. And I said also unto thee, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So there's gates in hell, literal gates. I'm taking that exactly word for word what it says. There's bars, there's gates, there's chains, and you got to have a key. Revelation 1, verse 18. Revelation 1:18. I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. He's amen in himself. And have the keys, plural, because he's going to give you two things of hell and of death. Two keys. It requires a key for God to unlock. A person cannot commit suicide unless God unlocks the door for him. Many of them attempt it and just maim themselves. Wish they hadn't done that. God has to open the door. He says in the tribulation, they'll be crying for the rocks to fall on them. They'll be wanting to die, and death will flee from them because God doesn't unlock the door. Look at it in well, we saw it in 20, verse 1. Back to, man, that's a long explanation for one verse. And First Peter 3, go to verse 21. Okay. First Peter 3, 21. The like figure, whereunto even baptism does also save us. Whoa. Get the context here. He's talked about him going down there and preaching to these spirits that he's judged, and they're disobedient, and they've been condemned and locked away since the days of Noah. Okay. And then it's like he does a 360 on you, or 180, or whatever the number is. The like figure, whereunto even baptism does also now save us. Not the putting away of the filth of the flesh, but the answer of a good conscience toward God by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Baptism obviously doesn't save anybody. He says in our verse, it's a figure. A figure means it's not the real thing. So if it's a figure of something, then that can't be salvation. That's got to be a picture of. And that's exactly right. Baptism is a picture of salvation, but it ain't salvation, just a picture. If they were saved by water, then it wasn't being immersed. And if baptism is a figure, then it's not the actual thing. It's something that's picturing. It's something that's a metaphor of the real thing. Baptism has nothing to do with washing away your sin, although that's what the Campbellites, and you'll find them, we call them water dogs. They want you to believe is that you need that water to get saved. Water is not, Jesus didn't require water to get saved. We got it in Acts 22. Acts 22, verse 16. And now why tarriest thou? Arise and be baptized, and wash away thy sins, calling on the name of the Lord. Now, if washing by being baptized would eliminate your sin, what's the need to call on the Lord? That would have been the end of the verse. There would have been no need to tack on the phrase calling on the Lord. It had just been go get wet and you'll get clean from your sin. I'd have to stay in the tub. Now that filth that Peter was talking about, you'll find that in 2 Corinthians 7. 2 Corinthians 7, verse 1. Having therefore these promises, dearly beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of God. That is sin, contamination. It just like dirt, it makes you filthy. And the more of the Bible you get, and the more of a true vision of God you come to realize, the more filthy you feel. Being spiritual doesn't mean that you feel spiritual. You should feel the opposite. You should feel, oh, I've still got a long way to go. There's things I've found now that I didn't know before, and I got to work on them. We got it in James 1, verse 21. He says, wherefore lay apart all filthiness and superfluity of naughtiness, and receive with meekness the engrafted word, which is able to save your souls. So it's the engrafted word that combats the filth. That's the one thing that is so simple to do, yet so hard for the flesh to give into, and that's read the Bible, listen to it, submit to it. Most people have the problem they don't read the Bible. But you'll find a crowd like ours that reads the Bible. They have other problems. Good news. You know what their problem is? They don't obey or apply the Bible they just read. That's a difficult one. First step, read the Bible. Second step, submit and apply it. If you read the Bible and you didn't get anything out of it, you told God what he said didn't matter. Because that was God from heaven speaking directly to you. He said something. Were you listening? Why am I getting hard? Second Peter 2, 2 verse 7. 2 Peter 2, verse 7. And delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. Just the conversation, hearing the conversation of wicked people gets you filthy. That's why we have to, I say, waller in the word. Just like a pig goes and wallers in slop, we're going to reverse it and waller in something holy and clean. And that'll clean you up. He says in Revelation 22, verse 11. Revelation 22:11. He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. Now they're at the end. No more time left. And he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. He says, time's up. We used to play freeze tag. That's what he's saying. Freeze. Time's up. Now I'm ending this right now. And it's a good thing he ends it. He says if he didn't, there wouldn't be any hope for anybody. But he ends it. At the end of 7 years of tribulation, he ends it. He says, now, everybody who is stuck, you're in the position you're in now, and there's no more chance to get forgiveness. There's a time that God's long suffering reaches an end. And long, even a long rope, has an end. This filth is the moral filth of the flesh, absolute sin. So baptism won't put away your sin when you go under the water. Otherwise, just taking a shower in the morning, you'd have been morally correct. Now, there might be something to that. Baptism is the answer, according to our verse, the answer of a good conscience toward God. The conscience has more to do with salvation than the Old Testament law does. The Old Testament law is a list of rules. There was righteousness in the law because it was from God, but that conscience tells you whether or not you obeyed. Your conscience will come alive and say, "Hey, you just did this." That's why you'll find in Leviticus, I believe it's is it chapter 4, chapter 6? I could find it for you, but in Leviticus he talks about a sin of ignorance. That is, you broke the law, but you did not know it. That is, your conscience didn't convict you of it. Otherwise, you would have known it. He says, when you do know it, when it comes to your attention, when the conscience wakes up and says, hey, you did that one, then you go do this sacrifice or that one. This conscience is all about Romans 2 and 3, where he talks about the people that didn't have the law were living according to the law written in their heart and in their mind. That's something God put in there. For instance, you can ask anybody, and they know one sin. What would you say is the sin? The sin everybody knows is murder. Ask them, are you going to heaven when you die? I've never murdered anybody. I don't know why that's the litmus test. I ask them, well, is Moses going to heaven? You know, he murdered somebody. Why do you think that's the litmus test for going to heaven or not? Must be something bigger than that. Look at it in Titus 1, verse 15. Titus 1:15. He says, unto the pure, all things are pure. But unto them that are defiled and unbelieving is nothing pure. But even their mind and conscience is defiled. So a man may think he has a clear conscience because he's seared his conscience, because the conscience is not speaking. So he thinks, my conscience hadn't convicted me of it. I don't feel bad about doing this or doing that. Well, you did it one time. Now you've killed the conscience. That's a double whammy. He says in our passage in 1 Peter 3, verse 20, he says, which sometime were disobedient when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah while the ark was preparing, wherein few, that is, 8 souls, were saved by water. Now, the Campbellite grabs a hold of that and says, see, that's salvation. How were they saved? By water. Okay, let's find out if it holds true. Did any of Noah or his sons jump in the water? No. The way they were saved by water is none of them got wet. That's what the boat was all about. So that water meant you didn't get touched by the water. The water is a picture of God's wrath, his punishment on the wicked people. And the ark was the way of safety for them. Noah didn't get baptized, and he didn't get sprinkled, he didn't get immersed. He may have got lightly grazed with some spray off of the waves if he was out on deck. But he was not baptized in the conventional sense.
The Jews were saved by water when they crossed over. As soon as they got over, the water course up and killed them.
Yes. Mhm. Yep. And there's a verse in he says they're all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, meaning the sea was on the right and the left side of them, and the cloud was above them. That's total immersion, but not getting wet. That's a dry baptism. Look at it in 2 Peter 2, verse 5. Second Peter 2, 5. And spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. Preaching righteousness didn't cause the flood, God caused the flood. But what it did was it made the people make a decision. I'll choose God or I'll reject God. It hastened their final conclusion. Look at it in Hebrews 11, verse 7. Hebrews 11:7. By faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house. Okay, there wasn't water, it's an ark. So everybody needs to go build an ark. Okay, to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. Now, there's something about this. He says this thing that happens with Noah condemns the world, brings judgment on them. Wow, that's heavy stuff. What happened with Noah in his day is God put the boys on the boat and shut the door, and that was it. And that's our message. Our message is this: one day God's going to say, I'm having no more opportunity for you to come. You better move now, because at some point the door closes and all opportunity is lost. Uh, Luke chapter 17, verse 27. People will tell you it's sprinkling, it's not baptism. Baptism is total immersion. Saying holds true. If you were the ones being baptized by God's water in Noah's day, you had no hope. He says, Luke 17, verse 27, they did eat, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. If you were immersed, you were doomed. Baptism there damns you, doesn't save you. In Noah's day, those that were baptized in the water died and went to hell. Obviously, our verse said it's a like figure, not the full thing. Baptism pictures it. It pictures the death, the burial, and the resurrection. Romans chapter 6. I have got too many notes on just this one verse. Romans 6. I got too excited on this one. Romans 6, verse 1. And of course, my file won't show this whole verse, but he says, what shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. How shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? Great passage. Now he's going to start talking about salvation. And he gives you a clear picture of what salvation is. It's obviously not baptism. Know ye not that so many of us as were baptized into Jesus Christ were baptized into his death? That's not a baptismal pool of water. The baptism that a church has is into water. That's a picture of something. The real one is this: baptized, immersed into Jesus Christ. You're in him and he's in you. That's total immersion. That's the real deal. That's salvation. He says, therefore we are buried with him by baptism unto death, that like as Christ raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. So just like Jesus died, was buried, and rose again, that should happen to us as well. Where do we stop? Verse 5. He says, for if we've been planted together in the likeness of his death, we shall be also in the likeness of his resurrection, knowing this, that our old man is crucified with him, that the body of sin might be destroyed, that henceforth we should not serve sin. For he that is dead is freed from sin. That's why the baptism is important, not because it's water, but because of what the actual event was. You're put into Christ. What happened to him counts for you. When he died, your old man died. The flesh is dead now. When he was buried, it's been cast as far as the east is from the west. And now you've risen a new creature, just like Jesus came up out of the grave. All right, there's more to this notes, but I can't cover them all. We'll maybe pick up there next week. I don't know. We'll probably move on. All right, that'll do it for tonight. We'll pick up at verse 22 next week.